very pleased to have one of our near and dear friends of Cal Pilot and quite frankly to general aviation overall. Everybody knows Mike Jesch. He is a CFI based out of Fullerton. He also flies for a legacy airline. Um, but most of us know him and his courses on ForeFlight that he generously donates his time. And so he is the EFB king in addition to being Captain Mike. Take it away, Mike.
I don't know if I'm a king about that. We just saw the kings for a little while, so but I'll give it my best shot here. Let me finish tidying up the screens here for a moment. And yeah, thanks, Eve. For those who haven't met me yet, I am a flight instructor based out of Fullerton Airport. I've been flying for a long time. I started flying out of Orange County, John Wayne, Santa Ana Airport. The airport's so nice, they named it thrice. Um, Way back, egads, I've been flying for 6 decades now, or in 6 decades, which is kind of a scary thing to think of, but I kind of cheated by getting checked out in the very last year of the 70s. Interesting seeing the whole group here. I've used John and Martha King stuff for some of my early on training. I remember watching Rod Machado as a very popular, well-known speaker, as an aviation safety counselor way back in the day when I was a brand new pilot. My first flight instructor brought me to several of his classes. And so I've kind of been flying around the area and with all these people for my entire career. And just past 37 years with my airline here a couple of months ago. Got 3 more years to go till I retire. So I can't even add that up, how long that is. But right now I'm flying a 787 at work. Typically I fly to Japan, but I fly a 182 that I have based at Fullerton. I have a small partnership with two other pilots there. And it keeps me busy, keeps me off the streets here, you might say. And so for a couple of years now, I've given a presentation here at Cal Pilots California Zooming that I call California Flying Oddities. And over the last couple of episodes, I've had the opportunity to kind of take a look around the Golden State here to see some of the interesting things that we have here. We have very complex airspace. We have the highest mountains and the lowest deserts. We have a lot of coastline. We have 3 different Class B airports, and plus you could probably add in Las Vegas that I think probably overlaps just a little tiny bit into California. I gave up counting how many Class Charlies and Class Deltas we have in the airport. I'm sorry, in the state, but there is a bunch. So it makes for very complex airspace to deal with. And when we were talking about what I'm gonna contribute here today, the idea came up with maybe a couple of different areas that we'll take a look at here. By the way, that's a picture of me in my work airplane there approaching Shanghai, China on one of my trips early on when I got qualified in the airplane. Now I've been flying the 787 for a little over 4 years now. Just got back from training last week, as a matter of fact. Um, and a quick reminder here, I do have some pretty valuable door prizes coming up at the end of the session here, but you have to be a member of Cal Pilots to win. I myself am a lifetime member. So here's a QR code you can click on, or let me see, Jolie will post that in the chat for you too. Just click on that link and join now. I've got over, I think it's coming up on $1,500 worth of prizes I'll be giving away in a little bit. So it's not too late to sign up. The prizes I get to give away are one of these pulse oximeters that we've been very generously given several of those today. I'm gonna give away a lift knee board, and I'm gonna give away the Precise Flight. This is an OxyPack 3, which is a 2-person oxygen system. And you can see 4 connectors there. There are 2, I guess it's just cannulas, and then 2 bags as well. So very nice system. That's almost a $1,400 value right there. So sign up now. It's not too late. So we thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the onboard backup systems that you might consider having in your airplane. And the ways that you might be ready to use these in flight, the ways that they could provide you some assistance maybe in a problem situation while you're in flight. And then also I'm going to talk just briefly about how you could use them if you end up having to land somewhere off field. California is kind of interesting. We've got a lot of mountainous terrain. We've got a lot of very remote terrain. Got some spaces where you're below radar coverage and maybe out of comms coverage. So there could be some cases where you're on your own, and it might be a good idea to have a couple of backups ready for yourself. And then I'm going to dive into EFBs. I'm an absolute convert to EFBs. I love EFBs. I use them at work. I teach them in little airplanes. They've got a lot of pros and cons to them, though, and we'll dive into that just a little bit. But I want to talk about a couple of particular aspects about EFBs that in flying around California with the complex airspace we have, we need to make sure that you know that first that you have the information you need available, and then that you know how to get to it. So we'll review some of those kinds of things. So if you're like most of us, and I know I certainly am, we either have installed or we're dreaming of installing some of these new advanced avionics. And these systems are great. They're very robust. They're a little bit expensive, that's the downside. But if you've installed some of these avionics, you've come to find out that they're awesome. It's awesome equipment to have installed in your airplane. They're generally speaking lighter than the original legacy type equipment you might have installed. They use less power. They're more reliable. They're more precise and more features than anything you have ever seen before. They make flying around anywhere, but particularly around the terrains that we have to deal with here in California and the airspace, they give you a lot more features to make it easier to fly around this space. But one of their Achilles heels is they rely on electricity. So if you're installing one of these in your aircraft, you have an electrical system, of course, and quite often these devices will have backup batteries as a capability installed, but two of the two airplanes I've flown, for instance, with that Aspen screen on the right there, there's a requirement to check that battery before every flight. And that battery, that backup battery needs to be replaced every so often. And both of those airplanes, when I started flying them, we did the tests on them and found that that battery had not been replaced and it did not have the capacity that it was supposed to have. So in one case, I was flying in a Seminole, we'd shut down an engine for training, and when we go to restart the engine, all the avionics, including the Aspen, would go dark because the battery wasn't enough to support that equipment when we lost the electrical system. So make sure that your battery is up to snuff, and if it's not, get it replaced. It has a built-in battery capacity test capability, and you need to do that every so often so that you can assure that your battery will last you if the onboard generator-driven system and then the backup battery, the aircraft battery, fails. You want to make sure you've still got some power available there for it. If all that stuff goes dark, what are you going to be left with? And what a lot of us are doing, for instance, I've talked to a couple of pilots I see online frequently. Somebody will say, hey, I just installed a new Aspen, or I just installed a new GI 275 or G5, so I'm going to sell my Sentry or my external GPS device. So they get rid of it, and their intent is to use the AHRS that's installed. Let's say on the bottom there, you see a Garmin GTX 345 transponder. That has an AHRS built into it that can talk to your iPad and can show you your attitude and heading information on there. The problem is, if you lose that onboard installed equipment, you're going to lose the display on your iPad as well. So I carry one of these. Hold it up there. This is a dual XGPS 190. I've flown with a lot of clients who use an Aspen, or I'm sorry, a Sentry or some kind of an external device. And this is a terrific backup tool to have in your bag, or ideally you install it on the window and you start using it right away. So that's one that we'll be diving into just a little bit more here in a moment. These GPS receivers are great. You always know where you are. With the AHRS, you always know which way is up. And with a portable aviation radio, which most of us have probably had for a long time, you have the ability to communicate if you lose all the onboard systems. But one of the things I find is a lot of people don't practice with this stuff. It's really important that you practice with this stuff so that you know how to connect to it. If you're flying at night in an airplane with a lost battery electrical system, and you need to switch over to the handheld radio, and you've got that radio maybe tucked in the seat back next to you or in your kit bag, can you get that thing out in the dark and connect your headset to it? Maybe even connect it into the airplane antenna system so that you get better range. You need to make sure you know how to do that. Um, I see a question there about range on these things. It's very weak. I did have to use my portable comm radio one time when I lost the onboard radios, but with our old avionics package, it's very weak. I almost couldn't talk to the tower until I was within about 5 miles of it. The standard aviation comm radio is generally about 10 watts of transmit power. You can get a 16 watt in the Garmin, the 430, 530. I know come in a standard is 10, optional 16. Your little handheld might be just a couple of watts. So it's very weak. If you're up in the teens, 15, 16,000 feet, you're probably not going to be able to reach anybody on the ground. So you'll need some way to boost it or get a better radio too. So AHRS stands for Attitude and Heading Reference System. These were first developed way back in the 60s. Actually, my father worked on some of the original INS inertial navigation type units on submarines back in the 40s and 50s. Brought it along into rocket guidance systems in the 60s and worked on the Apollo project. And then in the 70s, we started, late 60s, early 70s, we started to see them in airliners. They finally had gotten small enough that you could use on an airliner and inexpensive enough to install. And then in the 80s, with the advent of the 757 and 767, we saw laser ring gyros being used instead of the physical, metal gyros that were much smaller. They spooled up much quicker. They used a lot less energy and could be used in a lot more aircraft. So now it's pretty much automatic, and everybody has one. There's a couple of them right here in my external GPS AHRS unit. So that's the way that my iPad through this or through the AHRS that's installed in the airplane is going to know which way is up. So let's see here. So if you have any of this kind of equipment, first you need to know how to connect it, then you need to know how to use it and its limitations when you're flying along. So practice this. You can practice connecting at home before you get to the airplane. If you're using it in the airplane, especially the way I use mine is I connect mine into my airplane installed equipment. And if it fails, then I can connect it to my portable. I use my portable if I'm flying in a student's airplane. Maybe he's got older avionics and doesn't have the capability for me to connect into it. And then most importantly, you need to be able to practice this to fly the airplane. And if you're an instrument rated pilot, if you find yourself above a cloud deck, you need to practice flying an approach using this backup navigation. If you don't practice it, then it's just something that's taking up space in your airplane. It's not really a usable tool, especially when you consider that when you need to do this connection in the real world, you're going to be under duress. You're going to be stressed by the situation. It's going to be much harder to think straight. Your peripheral vision that's out here at 180 degrees is going to zero in on a little straw that you'll be looking through, and it's going to be harder to think. So if you practice these steps ahead of time, you'll be a lot more likely to be able to successfully complete them in the heat of battle. So on board in flight, with all this expensive certified stuff that's approved, it can leave you holding an empty bag when it goes out of service there. So don't be in such a hurry to get rid of that portable AHRS or GPS unit. Let's see, so those will not be available. This is what the Sentry looks like. I had a chance to use one of those about a month ago. I actually flew with an air traffic controller out to Las Vegas last month, and he brought his Sentry along, and it's a nice little unit. Again, it's important to know how to connect it, know how to use it, know its limitations, what you can use it for and what you cannot use it for, and just make yourself a lot more familiar with everything about it. I had the opportunity to fly with the guy who's the CEO of the company that makes these, and he was telling me about that carbon monoxide detection capability. He said they were kind of nearing the final design phase on this thing. They realized they had some extra power electrically and computing wise on the in the hardware, and they're spitballing, oh, what can we use it for? And somebody threw out the idea, how about a carbon monoxide detector? And somebody said, nah, nobody ever wants that. You got the portable stuff. I've got my carbon monoxide detector right here that I carry with me. You can use something like that. It turns out that this is one of the most popular features that this unit has. So people love that carbon monoxide detection. So it was just kind of an accidental thing that it got added, and it ended up being super popular. And now Lightspeed has added it to their Zulu 3 headset, and we're seeing it in a lot more places. Here, this is an example of a portable backup radio. You see how many wires and parts are components are associated with this thing. So make sure that your batteries are fresh when you get in the airplane. If you've got a charger capability in the airplane, keep it charged so that you know it's ready to go. On the left side there is the adapter. You plug that unit into the side of the transceiver, and then you can plug your headset directly into it, and then use your regular headset as the microphone and headphones. You got to figure the airplane cockpit is a noisy place. My airplane typically runs in the low 90s of decibels. There is no way that you're going to be able to hear that little bitty handheld radio in a noisy aircraft. So find a way to connect it into your headset, practice with that, and make sure you can do it in the dark or with your eyes closed, and make sure that it works, that you know how to use it. So I'm going to take us over to the iPad here now, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to, first I will stop my, where's my stop share button? Well, there it is. It's hiding under my Q&A box. I'll go move that. So this is the unit that I use. On the side is an on-off switch. So if I turn that on, then I can see the lights are coming on, they're blinking, things are getting set up. So the first thing to do is to turn your device on. This is especially important if you have one of those, a Sentry unit, for instance. If you start that, turn it on, and just put it in your window while you're out doing your exterior pre-flight on the airplane, you'll find that it will be receiving the data and collecting the data even before you've gotten your iPad connected to it. So now when you connect your iPad with ForeFlight is the EFB that I'm going to talk about here, because it's the one I'm most familiar with and most pilots use. Once you turn your iPad on, then all that data will be transferred, and it'll instantly show up on your iPad. So now I'm going to turn on my iPad, and it's going to show up right here. So bear with me a moment. I think I can. So here we are. I got my ForeFlight going here, and when you've turned on your device, the first thing is you need to go to, you need to turn on the correct kind of transmitters to talk to the device. In my case, it's a Bluetooth, and when I turn my Bluetooth on, first thing I'm going to get is my little mouse so you can see what I'm pointing at better. The next thing is you'll see my device here. So this is my XGPS 190. Sometimes these devices will automatically connect, and sometimes it takes a manual effort to do this. Sometimes if you click here, there might be a box in here that tells it to automatically connect when it's available. So if you have that, I would suggest you check that box. So now we come back into the iPad here. I'm going to bring up ForeFlight. So I've connected to my external device, and the way we're going to make sure that we're connected with ForeFlight is we come over here to More, and we scroll down, well, up here to Devices, and we should see the device, and it should have a green check mark. If everything is good so far, if you've got the power turned on to your remote unit and it's successfully connected, it should be all good. However, one more thing you need to do is tap in here, and sometimes there's a disable button over here. It might say it's not enabled or disabled. If that's the case, then you'll need to turn that on. So once that's turned on, now you should be getting some information from it. If you're starting to receive data from it, these red numbers and letters over here are going to be green, and you'll start seeing the data come in. Now in my case, I have mine on my desk in my office here. It's about 6 or 8 feet away from the window over there, so it's not close enough to a window to get position. Um, but once it gets all that information, it gets locked onto the satellites, gets the GPS position, it'll start showing up in here and you'll see information flipping by. Um, on ship, if it thinks it detects your airplane, if it sees an airplane that's moving right close with its position, it's going to assume that that's you, and so it won't be complaining about you quite so much as you fly along and tell you that you've got traffic too close. So we've connected it, we turned it on, we connected it, we verified the connections, everything's good. Now we can start seeing the data on here. And for instance, for the AHARS unit, the way we look at that is this icon up here that looks a little bit like an attitude indicator. You tap on that, it's going to go into a split screen mode, and now it's using the information that it knows about. Right now, it knows that I'm about 670 feet above sea level and I'm not moving. One of the problems with these in this case, and here's where you need to know the limitations of the equipment you're working with, is that this is a GPS altitude and speed. This is not a barometric altitude and speed. So it may be different than what your regular barometric altimeter is showing. And it's going to be ground speed off the GPS. It won't be airspeed. There are some units, not very many, but there are some, mostly installed equipment that can connect into your pedostatic system and get your real altitude and airspeed and show that. But most of the time it's going to be GPS information, which is close, but not precise. Now, you can see it moving around there. That's because I picked up my unit here. I'm holding it in my hand. And if I bank it left or right, you can see that starting to bank left and right. And if I turn, it starts to turn a little bit. And it's a little bit unstable here in my office because it doesn't have good signals. So you get the idea that if you set this thing up correctly before you start flying, and if you've practiced with doing this switch over in flight, then you're going to be a lot more likely to be able to successfully fly the airplane. And this could just be the tool that you use to get back down on the ground safely when things are really going wrong. So again, I'm using ForeFlight here just because something over 75%, it's the last numbers I've heard were a little over 80% of pilots use ForeFlight. So that's what I'm showing here. The connection process is similar in other EFBs. I've used it before with WingX. I've used it with Flight Plan Go. So whichever EFB or tablet hardware and software you use, you'll need to become familiar with these features and these techniques on whatever that is. So let me see here now. So let's come back over to my screen over there. Okay, so you've gone along in flight, things are going wrong. It looks like you're going to have to make an outfield landing somewhere. You're not going to be able to make it into an airport. So a couple things you should do along the way is advise ATC. And you were talking to ATC, right? You were getting flight following from LA Center, Oakland Center, NorCal TRACON, SoCal TRACON, whatever it is. You were talking to them, right? Please shake your head. Yes, you were. That's great. ATC wants to talk to you. They want to be there for you. They want to help you when you get into trouble. And if the worst happens and you find yourself starting to land out, you've got enough other things to do, then it's probably not a good idea at this moment now to be adding on the idea that you've got to establish contact with some facility that's going to be there to help you. You should do that ahead of time. That's my recommendation. Next is, even if you are talking to ATC, if you've got a second radio, get a call off on 121.5. A lot of other airplanes monitor that. You monitor that, right? Shake your head yes. You've got your second radio tuned to 121.5 anytime you're flying along and you're monitoring it. You can ignore the Delta Airlines calling in range. You can ignore the meows, the everything else. But if that happens too much, you can just turn the volume down, but make sure you turn it back up again. You should always have that there, and for many reasons. But one of the reasons is it's there for you. It's already set up, ready to go in the event that you get in trouble, you need some help. So if you are, one of the other reasons is you might be the aircraft that can render some assistance to somebody who's having a problem. So it's another good reason to have it handy. Next is while you're on the way down, activate your ELT. If you've updated your ELT as required in the last few years, you've got an arm button on the panel, you've got an on button. Hit that before you get to the ground. You can push that on button on your descent, and that way the message gets sent off right away. And the Air Force Rescue Coordination Center gets the message. They know how to contact you. They know how to contact whoever you have established as a point of contact. They know where you are, and they may even know that you're moving. But the idea is if you're going to land out somewhere, if your airplane gets damaged in that landing, the ELT might not function anymore. Maybe it's broken the antenna, the wire or something like that is dislodged from its position, and the signal's not going to be strong enough to reach a satellite at that point. So because you activated it before you got to the ground, they're already looking for you. They've sent the search parties out, the posse's on its way, and they're going to find you. So do that on your way down. Now, you get to the ground, and now the navigate aren't quite so important anymore. You don't have to worry about any more flying, and you're where you're going to be. You're not going to move to any new place, probably, at least not using the airplane. But you're going to want to be able to communicate and get the word out. First, that you're okay. Second, that where you are and what kind of assistance you need. So, here's some devices you might consider. Garmin makes an inReach. The one on the left there is a Messenger Plus. You can send text messages through your phone with it, basically. It has some minor capability to get out some very basic messages. The second one there, the Mini 2, offers a little bit more features and functions on it. On the right there is I just got a new iPhone 16 recently, last week, and it has built-in satellite connectivity right in it. So that was a screenshot I did yesterday in my backyard. And it can go through a process of connecting to a satellite. And then if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're out of the range of cell phone service, you can get at least some text message communication going with some emergency services and get them on your way. On the right there is a personal locator beacon. This is more like a 121.5 and a 406 ELT. That it's got a built-in, this one has a built-in GPS locator, so it also will send your position. And this is something that would work in the event that the airborne, that the equipment installed in the airplane didn't work for you. So you can get the rescue services out there looking for you using that device as well. So let's talk a little bit more about EFBs. The first question we often get about the legalities is it legal? Can I use an EFB for everything? Do I still need to carry paper? And AC 9178 covers most of this. It's the use of EFBs. You can search for this document, you can download it, you can install it, and I'm going to show you how to do that in ForeFlight. And you can read through this whole document. But the bottom line is it says for most of our Part 91 flying, yeah, you can use an EFB for whatever you want. It turns out that there's no regulation that says that you have to have charts on board your airplane to begin with. So anything you have, anything you use to get the charts is approved. It's all okay. There's a couple of rules in there. It's up to you as the owner operator to make sure that you know how to use it, first of all, and that it doesn't interfere with any installed avionics. That's one of the Part 91 rules says that the pilot in command or the operator is responsible to make that determination. I often see the question about what kind of mounting equipment can you use or should you use in your airplane. There's an AC for that there too. That 20-173 talks about different methods of installing an EFB in your airplane. So for me, I don't have a mount in the airplane. I tuck it in the side pocket of my 182 when I go fly, and I pull it out as and when I need it. So I don't always need it. I've got enough avionics installed in the airplane that have all the equipment I need. But there's some good advice in there about Velcro connections. I'm not so crazy about the ones that install on the yoke. For my taste, a yoke mounted uh, a mount, for lack of a better way to phrase it, it offsets the balance of the flight controls a little bit too much for me. It can make it a little bit top heavy and make the ailerons especially feel different than I'm expecting or than I'm used to. So that's not such a great thing in my mind, but your mileage might vary. Maybe you can mount it in such a way that the balance difference isn't so much. I see a question there. Where did I get the barometer setting when I showed you that split screen with the monitor there? I believe it gets a barometric setting from the GPS or maybe the last recorded barometer that my iPad knew about when I was connected earlier today. So these devices, these EFBs, because they're not certified equipment, they're auxiliary or augmenting information. It's only for situational awareness. You cannot use it legally to navigate as a primary or even a secondary form of navigation. You can't use your iPad to shoot an instrument approach in normal circumstances. And um, you can't use it legally to navigate to a fix or to tell how far away from something you are. As for IFR navigation. For VFR navigation, pretty much anything goes. It's also perfectly legal to install all your charts, manuals, handbooks, logbooks, any kind of documentation that you need. It's legal and safe and to install it in ForeFlight, but you're going to hear this repeating theme again. You need to make sure you know how to use it and where to find that information. So your legalities in an emergency now, in event of an emergency, all bets are off. Here's what 91.3 says. We should all be familiar with this. It's one of the first regulations we learn. Whatever the rules there are, you can throw them out the door if you declare an emergency or if somebody declared an emergency for you, which ATC can do. You can throw all those rules out to the extent necessary to meet the needs of that emergency. So anything goes is the way I phrase it. Use all available tools. And again, that tool is only good if you know how to use it. So make sure you understand it and practice with it so that you can get the information out. I keep hearing about a lot of check ride failures from pilots who they know the information's in there, but they don't know how to get it out. So make sure you know how to do that. Make sure you work with your instructor or a friend, somebody who knows how the EFB works, that you can get in and out of that. So here's my advice on that. It's just practice, practice, practice. If you can find a CFI who's familiar with your EFB, your tablet, your airplane, ideally, your entire setup, find an instructor who's familiar and can walk you through the different ways to use it. But if you can't find an instructor who's familiar, at least find another safety pilot who is, or if you can't find a safety pilot who is, let that safety pilot fly the airplane while you are going through the exercise here. There's too much division of attention, too much of a distraction, and it's your job as the pilot to be looking out the window, or whoever you designate to be flying the airplane. They should be looking out the window and minding the store while you are heads down and diverted, your attention is diverted away from the airplane. You need to make sure you've set some ground rules. And Rod Machado talked about that earlier today. If you're flying in the airplane, it's important to have a conversation before you take off, before you start the engine, about who's going to do what the expectations are here, what you want to do. That's a really important step to go through. Don't give that one short shrift. So as you're learning these tools, these devices, it's important to keep a couple skills in mind that you need to do. And there's another advisory circular. I didn't include it in that list, but there's one that shows the kinds of things that you should be able to do with that EFB, including, or any kind of navigation equipment, really, a GPS navigator. You should be able to navigate to a fix. You should be able to intercept a leg into a fix or fly an airway. You should be able to change your route. You should be able to change your destination. A whole bunch of features like this that you need to make sure that you know how to do. So first thing, the skill that's important to learn is how to keep the shiny side up, the greasy side down. You know, when you lose all the onboard stuff, if your vacuum tube, your vacuum pump fails, or excuse me for a second. If your attitude indicator fails, you need to be able to do the most important job of flying the airplane. That's always job one. Job two is to navigate. We're going to get the airplane pointed in the right direction, know where you are, know where you're going, and then coupled with that is get the information you need in order to be able to get to that place and then get into that airport. If you're an IFR pilot, and if there's clouds in the way, you're going to need to be able to fly an approach with the equipment. So these are all important steps that you need to be able to do before you consider yourself signed off or okay to fly with this stuff. You won't be able to fly a precision approach using the iPad. There's no way to see a glide slope or a glide path on it, but you should be able to do a non-precision approach. You could do something like a localizer approach or an LNAV type approach. Now, these can all be done in an emergency situation, and I would propose that you want to practice this before you need it in the heat of battle. So let's talk about some of these oddities running around the state here. We've talked before about the California has a range of a variety of natural and human terrain. We got airspace. We've got very complex mountain ranges, plural. We got an ocean on one side, so it's a really varied place to fly. It's part of why I love flying here. There's such a variety. And we're going to talk just briefly about that human created terrain in the form of class Bravo charts. It's easy to see on a sectional chart where these are, but you want to be able to see the details of them on your iPad in your EFB. And in order to do that, you need to make sure you have them downloaded, you know how to get to them. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of processes here. Again, using ForeFlight. If you tap on that Documents tab down at the bottom, it's going to take you to a screen that looks like this. And if you scroll down in that left-hand column over to the FAA Drive, and when you tap that drive, you're going to see all these different folders here of FAA documents. And the three that are most important in this particular subject area are, we've got one that's Class B Enhancement Graphics, we've got one that's Flyway Charts, and we've got one that's Visual Chart Supplemental. Now, last year I talked about how to make sure you have all this information downloaded. If we want, when we get to the end in the Q&A, I can walk you through that process again to make sure that you have the correct data downloaded. So among all these pieces of information here, if you look at it, you tap in this Class B Enhancement folder, we're going to see these enhancement graphics, and you can pick these. This is basically what used to be published on the back side of the old paper tech charts. So this is where you get them. And this is what they look like. And this may or may not be of much use to you, but let me see, here's my pointer here. Each of these corners here, sorry, this is not a real great copy here. Each of these corners is an RNAV waypoint that you could navigate to if you want. You can select that in your GPS navigator to find that edge line. You could even build these lines around that if you wanted in your navigator in a flight plan, for instance, and draw those. Most navigators also have the ability to turn on the airspace display, maybe in an aeronautical map mode, and we can do that in ForeFlight as well. So this is the LAX class Bravo airspace. I live over here, right under that section over here. But we've got latitude, longitude. In some cases, we've got waypoint names. We used to have waypoint names. We don't have them in the LA section. We got them in San Diego and San Francisco, but not LA. We've got VOR station name and radius and radial and distance for each of those. So a lot of information here, but this is one of those enhancement graphics that you can see in ForeFlight if you have this data downloaded. So this is the San Diego one. Again, we got our lat long, same description. We've got the altitude indicators, so the altitude's in that section. Sometimes it gets so complex that we can't put the information next to the corner, so we put a number there instead. So if you see those numbers, that number refers to these sections over off to the side. So you have to kind of put everything together to make it make sense. Now moving over to the fly charts section. This is another in the LA TAC chart. This is on the back side of the TAC chart. This is what it looks like. Here's the San Francisco one. This chart is a little problematic. Generally speaking, the flyways that are depicted here were designed a long time ago. So some of these are not current in the LA TAC, the fly chart in particular. It's very out of date, and actually it can give you some guidance to put you toward an area that might not be such a great place to be flying. So the big idea, though, the main thing I want to show you is these charts are available in ForeFlight if you've downloaded them. So you need to walk through that process, and we can do that in a little bit. Here's the LA TAC chart, flyway chart rather. Again, this is not super great resolution here. We'll see better in a little bit. But this section right here, for instance, just west of Long Beach Airport, a little bit east of Torrance Airport, shows you that the best place to fly here is 2,500 feet. The problem is we got jets coming off out of Long Beach who are climbing to 4,000, 6,000 and higher, and they come right through here, right at that altitude. So maybe not such a great place to be in your little airplane. Probably better to be 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet above the ground there. Likewise, it shows you the best place here is to be 5,500 or 4,500 along Victor 23 off of John Wayne, Orange County, Santa Ana Airport. That's right where the departures are flying out of John Wayne, flying out to the east. They're coming over here. So if you're at those altitudes, again, you're going to be right in their way. So we're working on trying to get these charts updated. It's a process, though. It's going to take some time. Here's the flight chart for San Diego. So moving down to the visual chart supplemental, and this one is particularly important in the Los Angeles area. This is the catalog of all the supplemental charts that are available. So we can see Anchorage is over here, and we got Las Vegas over here, supplemental information. Over here is the Los Angeles TAC supplemental. I'm going to show you some on that, and the San Diego is over here. So looking. And one other thing I want to point out here too is you see these have green check marks. If you're looking at this on your iPad and you don't have a green check mark, maybe you got a blue spot there, that means that data is not downloaded on your iPad. So before you go flying, it would be a good idea to tap on that and download it to make sure you've got this information available. Otherwise, it won't be available in flight. So this is the San Diego, this is the LA, the Coliseum route. This is one of the Class Bravo transition routes from south to north, or vice versa. This particular route is for altitudes 8,500 or 9,500, depending which direction you're going. Starts at the Van Nuys VOR. There's your frequency. You're going to set up the Van Nuys 125 radial, and you're going to fly right along there. Now, if we look down here, let me see, it says ATC clearance required. You are inside the Class Bravo on this particular route, so you need to be talking to SoCal TRACON, and they need to tell you you are cleared to enter the Los Angeles Class Bravo via the Coliseum route, maintain 9,500. Now you've got your authorization, you can go inside and go about your business. And you can see that down in the notes here, remain outside Bravo airspace until receiving Bravo clearance. If you're going that direction and you haven't heard those words, ask the controller. Ask him to say that I'm cleared into the Bravo. If they don't say that, then you need to turn around. You need to stay clear until they say that. So this is the San Diego version of the VFR corridor. Now this is, we're going to talk about corridors here just for a moment. This is actually through the Bravo, a section of it that's Class Echo. And these are the rules. If you're going to go southbound, you need to stay on the right side of that line. It's all visual, so that's why it gives you such a great outline of the shoreline here. You can see exactly where you're supposed to be. If you're right about over the Hotel Del there, right next to this drop zone at the proper altitude, you're good to go. And northbound, again, stay on the right side of it. Follow these lines. You want to be on this shoreline right here, outside of this Bravo airspace, and then northbound up to these interchanges. So you can read the small text there on your unit. It's a good idea if you're contemplating flying one of these to do this in the comfort of your your office or your couch at home. Don't try reading this at the last second in the airplane when you're trying to fly along and do it. So going over to the map mode, we've got three different ways of seeing charts on here. We got the aeronautical layer, we got the VFR sectional, and you got the VFR flyway. If you're looking at the map in ForeFlight and you see this kind of a chart here, that's because you have this US VFR flyway chart selected. If you'd rather see the sectional or the TAC chart underneath that, then just turn this off and it'll show you the standard navigational charts. So this is flying across the LA basin from north to south here. Another way to get these charts are, let me see, is this what we're going to do here? Yeah, so another way to see these is at the edge of the TAC chart. Here I've got a section of the chart. I got sectional on this side, and I got TAC chart on this side. If you zoom in enough in ForeFlight, it automatically changes the zoom level to show you the TAC chart. But we just see the edge of the TAC chart. And if you remember the old paper charts, there would be a bunch of information over on the side of that chart. And that was these flyways that we were just talking about a moment ago. So if you want to turn those on, one way to do that, if you click on this little gear icon up here, it's going to bring this menu down. You're going to scroll down until you see this map touch action, tap in there, and you're going to select bring chart to front with legends. And once you do that, this is what you see on the side of the chart. Notice we're still on the maps page down here, but on the map, it has overlaid the TAC chart over the top of the sectional chart, and here's where these routes are depicted. So that's one way to get the data. I prefer the other way with the separate document. So whichever you prefer. In this graphic here, I've depicted where the transition routes are from north to south. This is the Coliseum route I showed you a moment ago. We've got this is the Special Flight Rules corridor over Santa Monica. There's a mini route. There's all sorts of routes through there. So a lot of different ways to get from north to south. If you're flying up from San Diego, let's say, to Santa Barbara, you call SoCal Tracon. They're going to say, advise your intentions or say how you're going to transit through the Bravo, and they'll ask you which route you want. So you can just tell them it's going to be along one of these lines. So these routes are over on the side there. You can zoom in on them and see what you need to see. And I want to talk a little bit about the Special Flight Rules area. I've talked about this in the past, and it's one of my current constant discussion points. A lot of people will call this a corridor. And back in the old days, in the 80s, when I was flying around here, when they built the terminal control area, the TCA that used to exist before it was Bravo, there was actually a tunnel through this. It was class Bravo below, and it was class Bravo above, but through this area, it was class Echo airspace, or what is now class E, uncontrolled airspace, controlled airspace rather. Now it's class B, class Bravo, from the top to the bottom. So my question is it ever okay to be inside class Bravo airspace without an ATC clearance? So think about that for a moment. I told you a moment ago that you have to have a controller say you're cleared to enter the Bravo. But here we are on this Los Angeles Special Flight Rules area chart, the CIFRA route. You are legally inside class Bravo airspace without a clearance. So the reason we can do this, there's a waiver for this area. It's a Special Flight Rules area, basically. It's been depicted and decided and discussed and debated ad nauseum. And in exchange for allowing you to be in the Bravo airspace without a clearance, you have to comply with these rules. So it says right down here, the following rules shall be adhered to when utilizing the Los Angeles Special Flight Rules area. So it lists a whole bunch of rules. And among those rules are it must be VFR. You got to comply with 155, 155. That is your VFR cloud clearance and visibility requirements. So the requirements of, um, I take it to mean that the requirements of Class Bravo airspace, which is 3 miles clear of clouds, do not apply. It's basically the Class E rules. Last time I had an interaction on this, I was on an IFR flight plan. There was a VFR airplane coming the other way that was about 100 feet above the top of the cloud deck. And I had to take evasive action to avoid him because he was about 200 feet below me. So there was an airplane that wasn't complying with that rule. When you're in this area on this routing, you have to be squawking 1201. You have to have this chart on board in the aircraft. So it's hard to get a hold of the paper ones anymore, but if you've got it in ForeFlight, you need to know how to do that. So that's what I'm showing you here. You have to be navigating on the Santa Monica VH1, the 132 radial. You have to be at these altitudes, 3,500 feet southeast bound, 4,500 northwest bound. You have to be a maximum airspeed shall not exceed 140 knots. Got to have your lights on. That's always a good idea. My lights are on full time anyway. Turbojet aircraft are prohibited. The very first time I flew this route, I was minding my own business at 4,500. I was indicating 130 knots in my 182, and I was passed by a Cessna citation like I was standing still. And that citation was not talking on the frequency, was exceeding the speed limit, and he was a turbojet that's not allowed. So that's when I decided, the first time I tried to use it, that it was basically the wild, wild west out here, and I was on my own. So I decided I wasn't going to do that one anymore, and my preference is to fly one of the published routes where I'm talking to ATC. Let's see, so the Coliseum route here, I prefer these much better. Stay clear until you get your clearance. And let's see, Eve, do we have any questions that I can address while we're here?
There's one question in the chat, although it's specific to whether instruction would be helpful at a destination airport when traveling to Deer Valley or Scottsdale.
Sorry, I'm not following you there. What about Deer Valley? I lost that one.
It's a question in the chat. It's not the Q&A. And the
Okay.
question is, Mike, I'm a 500-hour VFR pilot flying out of a Class Delta home base in Northern
Okay.
California, hoping to someday fly to visit relatives in Scottsdale or perhaps Deer Valley. Would it be
Um,
worthwhile to pay?
yes. And you might not even need to pay. If you're going to a new airport that you've never flown to, I've even done this somewhat recently. I've called the local airport. I've tried, in various times, various ways, I've called the airport manager, or I've called a flight school on the airport, and I'd ask to talk to one of their instructors and ask them for some advice on how do you get in and out. And maybe it's a 10 or 15, 20-minute phone call, and they'll give you the advice for flying in. Some instructors might charge for that. I probably wouldn't do it if it was 10 or 15 minutes worth. But then once you get there, I've had other people who fly into the LA area, and maybe in fact, I flew with a gentleman from Oklahoma one time. He flew into this area, landed somewhere, he got a hold of me, and we went flying. And I showed him how to transition the airspace. We went through the Bravo, we went through a couple of Charlies, we landed at some non-tower and some towered airports. Um, just kind of, especially you get somebody from the Midwest and they're flying here, they're not familiar, it can be pretty overwhelming looking at that chart. There's a lot of stuff. So yeah, it's absolutely worthwhile reaching out. Let's see, I see David is a big fan of the coastal route. That's a great one. Um, yeah, Melissa mentions a lot of airports also will have websites. I don't know off the top of my head about Deer Valley. I've only flown in there, I think, twice. But if you look for a website with the airport, and Big Bear is a great example of it, I think it's flybigbear.com. I don't know. If you Google Big Bear Airport pilots, there will be a link to a page that shows you their preferred entry method. And anytime you've got an airport that's right next to um, a geological feature or an airspace feature, there's probably a website associated that has information for getting in and out of the airport. In past years, I've talked about Big Bear, I've talked about Cable Airport, I've talked about San Carlos. Um, Santa Paula is also a good one. There's specific ways that the airport there would like you to get in and out of that airport. Do a little bit of research before you leave. Add that, make it part of your flight planning, and you'll be a lot less stressed when you come into the airport.
Yes, and Mike, there is a from the flight deck video from the FAA about flying into Deer Valley, which
Oh,
would be helpful. And there's also a pilot handbook published by the FAA about flying into Deer Valley, which is a good resource as well.
great. Yeah, and I see Tim just posted the Deer Valley FAA airport link there in the chat. Um, and if you can find it, I'm a little busy right now, Eve, but I did earlier post the link to the From the Flight Deck videos in the chat there that you mentioned in your talk. So that's a great resource for some of the busier airports. This is an expanding program. I know in our area here, we have one for Chino. I believe we have one for Long Beach. Um, and I don't know how far they've gotten. They keep adding. There it is. Thanks, Eve. So go to that last link that Eve just posted, and there will be great videos that talk about the issues getting in and out of that airport. Add that to a part of your pre-flight planning routine, and again, let's reduce the stress out there. So I want to talk about some useful KML layers, and Eve talked about this in her talk. So let me just switch back over to the iPad, and I'll walk you through how to do this. I wish this connection was a little bit easier to do. So the example I'm going to show you is the layers that that Eve showed. She showed a bunch of red squares around here that you can overlay in your ForeFlight. Let me turn off the traffic. That makes for kind of a busy one. So what you need to do is go find the document first, find the KML file. And the way you do that is if you open up a browser, let me go done here. Here's the site to go to. It's right up here. It's chartaware.com. If you go to that website, it's going to take you to a site that's going to look like this. And if you scroll down just a little bit below this graphic, that's an interesting graphic, and that's another whole subject. But here's a link here that says, oops, let me get this box out of the way. Sorry about that. Download the aerobatic practice areas. Want to add the aerobatic and practice? Just download this KML file. So if you tap there, it's going to ask you if you want to download this file. So download that file, and you'll see this little download button just kind of wobbled around a little bit. If you click in there, you're going to see this file, and you're going to click on that file. It doesn't look like much right now. It's a KML file, and you really can't do anything with it in the browser. But what we're going to do is we're going to click this Send To button up here, and we're going to send this over to ForeFlight. So you might need to scroll to the right in here. You might need to tap in more and scroll down in the suggestions there till you see it. But if you're lucky and you did it right, you can see it right here. Just tap on ForeFlight, and we're going to take this KML file that we just downloaded, and we're going to send it over to ForeFlight and see what ForeFlight does with it. So it asks you if you want to save this file, and where do you want to save it? So it really only gives you one option. It recognizes that this is custom content. So you click on that, and it says, okay, in the custom content, this looks like a custom map layer. So if you click on that, import success. So now we've downloaded that file. And if you wanted to double check that, you can click over here to more, come up here to custom content. And we have a couple of different kinds of custom content. By the way, here's the airport construction stuff. I think Eve mentioned this earlier, but you can find the official FAA notes on airport construction for various airports is in there. All your user waypoints that you've defined are in here. Custom map layers. So I've got a couple already installed, but here's the one I just installed. And so one way you can activate that is click this Send to Map, and it sends it over to the map. And if we look down here and scroll down in our layer selector, you'll see that it has now selected this map layer. So come back over to the map here, and we can see these practice areas. So if you're an instructor or a student looking for a place to practice your maneuvers, you got the Santa Fe area practice areas right here. And if you click on this little dot in the center of it, it gives you the information about it. Here's the name of it, the variation, coordinates, and so forth. You click on more details. Here it's got the altitudes, it's got the frequencies, it tells you what's going on in that space, and it tells you where that came from. So I find this to be a very useful tool as an instructor, as a pilot. If you're just flying through, you might even though you weren't looking for a practice area, you might consider downloading and selecting this, at least taking a look at it, to be aware of what airspace you are flying close to. So, for instance, over here at Santa Paula, we've got a bunch of airways that come right by the Fillmore VOR, and lo and behold, we click here, and we've got intensive aerobatic training from 1500 AGL to 5500 MSL. So might not be such a good idea to come flying through here at 5,000 feet. If you are going to fly anywhere around there, might be a good idea to listen to 122775 and see if anybody is flying around there. So again, great information to have to kind of get yourself a bit more familiar. And one of my favorites to look at in this regard is the Arizona group. I saw Lee Unger won something here. She's one of my heroes from the Arizona area. The Arizona Flight Training Work Group has created one to cover the practice areas around Arizona. So check this out. Bring this layer up, come over here. This one they've got all color coded. They got the names of various waypoints inside the practice area. So if you're flying through here and somebody says they're at the tire farm and you're over here at Woosley Park, well, you know you don't need to worry about that traffic. And a similar sort of idea, you can tap in there. It doesn't give you the information, the frequencies here, but we've got a couple of different shaped ones that I thought did. But we do see the gray one here, and that's got the frequency for that practice area, 12892. So the one problem with these routes is there is these overlays. There's no official method of disseminating updates. So you're on your own to make sure that you get the most recent information. Okay, so that is what I've got on practice areas here. Let me think. Let's see. So that was the custom KML. Now, another thing you can do, I've been mentioning about bringing documents into ForeFlight. Let me turn these layers off because that's kind of a complicated one here. I like to go find documents that apply to my airplane and the kind of instructing I do. So if you come down here to documents, you can create all sorts of folders. The one I showed you before was the FAA folder, and that's where you get these charts, supplements, Class B enhancement graphics, and so forth. The regulations are available, handbooks, all sorts of handbooks, all those things that you pay Sporties or ACA to create these handbooks, they're all here. In the ForeFlight folder, I strongly suggest you at least download this one, the A1, the ForeFlight Mobile Pilot's Guide. That's got all the answers to everything you need to know about how to use ForeFlight. If you've got something you see on a map somewhere that you don't understand, you probably want to get this ForeFlight Legends Guide. If you file flight plans using ForeFlight, there's a whole bunch of documents here. We don't have time to get into them all. But one of the things I do is I download, whenever I fly an airplane that has a new piece of equipment in it, I download the equipment manuals. I go to the manufacturer's website. Typically, they'll have a tab that's called Support, and there will usually be pilot handbooks, sometimes installation manuals available, and I import those into ForeFlight. And I put them all in this equipment manual, and then if I fly an airplane a lot, like for instance, here's my airplane, I also include those same manuals in this folder for my airplane, and that way I know that these are the manuals for all the equipment in my airplane. So how do we do this? We come over here to my web browser, and I'm going to show you over here. In this example, I'm just going to show you a kind of a fun document here. If you go to captainshift.com, this is my good friend Brian Schiff, a fellow airline pilot friend of mine, and for those of you who don't know, he and I have been hosting a monthly series on ForeFlight for a year and a half, maybe a little more than a year and a half now. He's got an excellent website here with a whole bunch of great information. Shift notes, he calls them. It's called the Proficient Pilot. You can get to it looking for that, or you can go to captainshift.com. But you scroll down here, and if you click on Shift Notes, he's got a bunch of documents in here. And one, let's say you're a student pilot working on your private pilot certificate. So he's got a nice little diagram here of what kind of flight experience you have to have. And it turns out that this is a PDF document. So any kind of a PDF document you can import to ForeFlight. Here's how you do it. You open that document up, you click that little Send To button, you get the little list here, you can send it to ForeFlight, and it will ask you, where do you want to put it? Do you want to attach it to a flight, or do you want to put it in your documents folder? And I'm going to say I'm going to put it in my documents folder. So it transfers it into ForeFlight, it opens it up, and presto, here it is. So while I'm here, I typically will also hit this little folder with a plus on it. I'm going to add this to a folder, and maybe I'm going to put this in my CFI documents binder along with the other documents I have in there. So now this document is in ForeFlight. I'm in my documents section over here if I want to look for it. This is, I scroll up here to my CFI documents, I put it in there, and scroll down here. It's probably the last one in the folder. Yeah, here it is, Private Pilot ASEL. That's how I get back to it. Everything I've ever imported to ForeFlight is down here in this imported document. So here's a whole bunch of files, all the different kinds of stuff I've imported over the years. They're all in here. So you can always find them there. This EFB documents, actually we're going to run out of time here, so I don't have time to show you how to connect this up, but this is a folder that's shared with my laptop computer at home. So if I'm working on my computer at home, I can open a document, drag it over to this folder, and then open it up in ForeFlight, and there it is. So that ought to keep you busy for a little while. And let's see, how are we doing on questions? Anything new?
I think they've all been answered.
Okay.
But somebody is asking, I think they were only asking for the link to the chart aware for the practice areas, but the recording of this seminar will be uploaded to the Cal Pilots YouTube page in the coming days. And so you can always have a review of it on the Cal Pilots YouTube page.
Yes, and if you just Google AFTW, or their website is aftw.org, it stands for Arizona Flight Training Work Group, an amazing organization, by the way, especially if you're a flight instructor in the area. But one of the resources on their page is that link to that KML file. Also, Brian and I have a website called foreflightworkshops.com that has a whole bunch of resources, mostly toward ForeFlight, some generic stuff. But one of the sections on that website is a list of useful KML files. So one that we've included is somebody had created a KML file that was a list of airports that had on-field restaurants. So that's kind of a handy thing to have. So that's at foreflightworkshops.com. So general flying tips here. First thing is plan ahead. Spend a little bit of time before you leave the house. Make sure your charts are all up to date. Make sure your documents are all up to date. Make sure your flight plan is up to date, that you've downloaded the files that you need, that you've updated the weather and so forth. And practice with these devices. If you use one of these external GPS receivers, make sure you can connect to it first of all, that you know how it works. Make sure it's got a good full charge before you go flying. And just practice with this at home in the comfort of your home. If you want more practice with the tablet, with the EFB, a lot of simulators will work with it. ForeFlight will work with, I've used it with Microsoft FSX. Rod Machado talked about that earlier today. It also works with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. It works with X-Plane, both 11 and 12. In fact, the last episode that Brian and I did, we did a lot of work with X-Plane 12 with ForeFlight. Also, some Redbird simulators can connect if they're properly equipped. We can connect the ForeFlight to the Redbird simulators, so as you're practicing your IFR maneuvers, you can develop your techniques that you're going to use in the airplane without burning any 100 low lead and without having to worry about turbulence or traffic or anything else. So that's kind of handy. Just practice, practice, practice with all these tools all the time. Enjoy the view. We talked earlier with Rod about that great big windshield out front. That's the biggest flight instrument on your airplane and the most valuable. And probably in the as things get more advanced with more and more of these fancy avionics, it's less appreciated to get your head back outside the window. If you look down at your screen, my mantra is 3 taps or 3 seconds. If you're going to look down at your iPad and divert your attention from the window, you're allowed a maximum of 3 taps on the screen or 3 seconds looking down at that screen. And then get back outside. Do another traffic scan. Do another internal scan, your flight instruments, your warning lights. Make sure everything's okay. Maybe look over at your passengers. Make sure they're doing okay. But you have to make a conscious decision and conscious effort to get your eyes back outside the airplane. So there's a lot of good online content. I've mentioned a little bit the ForeFlight workshops that Brian and I have done. There's a lot of other great stuff out there. There's a lot of other not so great stuff out there. So be cautious. Uh, there are um, there are groups on social media that will help get answers to questions that you have. If you're going to use one of those, make sure you do a little search through the group first or for some other resources and that you've downloaded some of these. I've talked about the legends and the manual. Give a little quick look through those resources before you go out in public. Otherwise, some of these groups are not too shy about letting you know where stuff is and that maybe you should have spent a little bit of effort on your own before you come to them looking for help. So also, always keep a plan B in mind. Always know where your solid gold weather alternates are, um, where your good weather is, and keep in mind when you're flying along, if you might need to land somewhere, why do you need to land there? If you're landing there just for more fuel, make sure they've got fuel. If it's late in the day and there's weather in the area, or maybe a disabled aircraft at your airport, you're landing for that, make sure you've got the resources available that you need, whether that's a rental car or a restaurant or a hotel or some kind of ground transportation. Um, Make sure you're diverting to an airport that you're going to be able to get the stuff that you need there. That's all part of your pre-flight planning. And finally, my mantra always: fly safe, fly more, and have fun. That's why we're here. Both Rod and John and Martha talked about this, that this is supposed to be fun. If it's not fun, you're probably doing it wrong. Maybe you're stressing a little bit more than you need to. And the more you fly, the easier it is to have fun. And obviously, if you're not safe first, then it won't be fun because nobody wants to be unsafe when you're flying. That makes everything a lot more work, makes more paperwork. So don't do that either. A couple quick little plugs here. This is my YouTube channel. Haven't put a bunch of stuff on it lately. I've been busy with the ForeFlight workshops with Brian. But this link will take you to my YouTube channel. I've got a whole series I did a couple years ago about the Garmin 430 and 530. And one of these days, when I get some spare time, I'm going to crank up on the GTN 750 and 650 because I've been flying some more of those lately. And I think I'm going to put one of those in my airplane. If you're interested in the ForeFlight Workshops program, this link will take you to our webpage. That has links to all the recordings of the previous programs as well as all these other resources. Some other videos that other people have done, some of the tools that we've devised and discovered over the years, and some great advice. So that's all available there. And finally, I'll go thank you for coming today, for attending this presentation right now, for reaching out. I get emails all the time from people on various stuff. That's why I do this. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing it. It keeps my head in the game. Like John King said just an hour or so ago, you should always be learning. If you stop learning, then it's time to hang it up. You really need to keep an open mind. Always get out there, attend events like this, in-person seminars wherever you can, whatever floats your boat. What kind of other stuff makes you interested? You can never learn everything. So the more you do that, the more it's going to be fun and challenging and keep your brain going. So, having said that, that is the end of my presentation. Now, what do we got for open questions out here?
So there is one question, which is for those who do not use ForeFlight. Do you have any recommendations, particularly those who use Garmin Pilot?
Yeah, find somebody who knows how to work Garmin Pilot. I have one of my partners uses Garmin Pilot, and a lot of people are switching to Pilot just because it has the capability of doing the upload of the nav data into your, especially GTNs, but also perspective type navigation units. So there's a good reason to use Garmin Pilot. Um, but don't come to me. I'm afraid I can't help you with with Garmin Pilot. I'm no good at it. I used to teach WingX quite a lot. It's a great EFB. It's got some incredible capability in it. If you're a flight instructor, you can get a free subscription to it. I believe that program is still in place. Um, if you're a real cheapskate, or maybe you don't use an iPad, you need something that's more platform agnostic. Garmin Pilot will work on a Android type device, as will Flight Plan Go. That's another one. That one's free. It's cross-platform, works on both. I've used it on both. Not quite, for my money, it's not quite as clean as the ForeFlight implementation, but it will get you there, and it's a free source of charts. So, but the important thing is find people who do know these tools and get with them. They're happy to show you how to use it generally.
Yes, and most important, thank you, Melissa.